You're listening to The Instant Leader, where leadership isn't about titles, it's about the influence we create through our actions. I'm Andy Lee, coach and founder of The Instant Leader. Each episode, I sit down with leaders from all walks of life to unpack honest stories, practical tactics, and the small, everyday behaviors that build real impact. If you want to grow your influence at work and beyond without waiting for permission, you're in the right place. Let's get into it. Today, I sit down with Suzanne Darmory, Chief Marketing Officer, entrepreneur, agency owner, and seasoned creative leader. Suzanne's journey spans global campaigns, iconic brands, and fierce career pivots, from modeling runways to leading the change at companies like L'Oreal, IBM, and more. In this episode, we dive deep into what truly sets a leader apart: collaboration over competition, mentorship, kindness, and the power of crafting your personal hook. Discover valuable insights on overcoming setbacks, building resilient teams, and why emotional intelligence and equality matter just as much as strategy. If you're ready to rethink leadership and get inspired by Suzanne's bold, empathetic approach, this conversation is one you won't want to miss. Suzanne, welcome to the show, the Instant Leader podcast. It's a privilege and an honor to have you on the show. Suzanne, you're the CMO of the agency without the E. I'd love for you to give a brief introduction as to what that role entails, and also a bit of background and context to how you got to your current position.
Andy, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been about a minute since we last connected when our paths crossed in the industry.
Yes.
I'm so excited to be here and to reconnect with you.
Likewise.
So I am CMO of the agency, which is a boutique agency, and we specialize in turning people into brands and brands into world-class brands. And I have owned my agency for just over 6 years. I started in the advertising world as a copywriter, made my way up to the C-suite via jobs in New York and London. And then during the pandemic, I moved over brand side and marketing side to work at L'Oreal, then on to IBM, Mayor Bloomberg's presidential campaign, and then Jackson Hewitt, and most recently hit the C-suite at Refundo as their chief marketing officer. All the while I had my agency and I was building it quietly in the background. And that is where I am right now.
That's great. So, congratulations on your achievements thus far. You must have taken a lot of hard work to get to where you are right now. How did it all begin for you?
It started a million years ago, it feels like. So I was studying to be a fine artist. I was studying in Paris and FIT. And then at the last minute, my mom said, well, you need to get a real job before you're an artist. So go to school. And so I went to Boston University where I was studying advertising. And I met one of my favorite mentors, Alan Holliday. He was my teacher. And I was his TA of Hill Holliday. And he was a pivotal part of my life and my career, my early career for sure. So once I graduated, I got recruited by Ford to be a runway model for a year. So I took some time off and he said, as soon as you're ready to go to work, just let me know. So I spent a year on the runway and I said, I'm ready, I'm done. I had my retirement meal of Burger King, McDonald's, and Taco Bell and Wendy's. Because you're very hungry when you're modeling. So on to the advertising world, I then started my first job as a copywriter at Gray Interactive.
And so was there something you always knew you were going to get into?
I sort of did. My mom found an essay that I wrote at the age of 14 saying I wanted 3 things when I grew up. One is to have 2 kids. 2 was to be a creative director making $40,000 a year, and 3 was to own my own advertising agency. So I guess at 14, I sort of knew.
Wow. So
and they've all come true. Thank God.
It's amazing. You should have carried on the list.
Exactly.
So this is about leadership. How do you feel that leadership has kind of impacted you, and how has that, your thoughts about it kind of evolved? From the beginning, you had to think about it up until like now.
Yeah, it's interesting. Leadership is one of those things that you don't understand when you're learning from it.
Mm.
And the best leaders do it quietly and stay with you forever. I've had a few wonderful bosses who have taught me how to be a fierce leader. I've had a lot of bosses who have taught me what not to do along the way as well. So I've learned from the best. I've learned from some of the more challenging. And I think having the responsibility of being a leader is understanding that everyone is different and that they have to be treated differently and get to know each individual team member and understand, what makes them tick, what keeps them motivated, and really what will make them excel. And I think understanding that everybody is unique and not saying, okay, well, these are all our art directors or copywriters or project managers, and they're all the same. They're not. It couldn't be more different.
And so, with regards to your own leadership journey, then, Suzanne, was there a point when then you consciously, like a switch was flipped, and you realized, oh, I'm a leader now, or like, how did that play out in your mind?
Yeah, it was interesting. Being a leader and being trusted to motivate, manage, and inspire and create great work, working closely with clients is an interesting moment. And I did have that aha moment. I was working at an agency in New York, and the moment I realized I really was a leader was when I gave my team and my kids the same lecture in the same day. Where I was like, "You need to do better. You need to think of others." And it was that moment where I was like, I literally just spoke to my kids the same way I spoke to my team. And there was a reason. It was both felt like they weren't doing the best they could. So and that company, I got a hashtag and it was hashtag boss lady. And, they had this blog and I think that day they said, boss lady told us to do better. It's just like, it was really funny. I liked the hashtag boss lady. That was a fun blog.
And that I love that, and that is very interesting because boss lady, and sometimes the word boss maybe equivalent to like manager,
Hmm.
sometimes could be conflated with the word leader.
Right.
What's your take on that? Is there a difference, or is it just semantics that we're talking here?
Yes, there's a huge difference, right? Bosses are some people, in my opinion, traditionally bosses boss you around, right? They tell you what to do. They sort of set the parameters on what is expected, but they also dictate a lot. Leaders inspire. They don't micromanage, they macromanage. And they inspire, they make sure they set their people up with success, with kindness, and really just teaching them how to lead instead of micromanage.
Sure. Great. Well, let's dig in a little bit more into that. You mentioned before that you've had the privilege of working with great leaders and also maybe not so great leaders that you've learned from. You've shared in your notes that you were fired from your first two jobs. Tell me what that journey and that experience was like. What did it teach you?
It was interesting. So my first job, as I mentioned at Gray Entertainment, I had a very interesting role. There were about 8 or 10 of us writers, and we were working on ABC television, and we had to come up with these quick taglines. We had about 15 to 20 minutes per, these like we had to create these headlines or taglines for the show. And they gave everyone the same brief. It was like this pit of 8 to 10 of us, depending on the day, how many people were in the office. And they'd say, okay, timer, go, best one wins. So you'd have to come back within that time, read off all your potential headlines, taglines. The best one won, the rest went back to their desks, right? And it was a constant, this sort of battle. And what I like to call it is like drive through copy, right? It felt very transactional, like, I want an extra fry, I would like a large Coke. It was very like, okay, drive through, drive through, drive through. So because I had a boss and not a leader at that job, I did not do phenomenally well there. I got overwhelmed. I got stressed out. It was a very stressful environment. It's sort of that like kill or be killed kind of thing. And I was fired from there. My second job, I was running through, I think I had like 4 different jobs. I was assistant to the CEO. I was the junior copywriter. I was the art buyer. and I had another role, like proofreader or something. So I was sort of like a whole, bunch of jobs in one job. I was not set up for a lot of success with that because it's hard to be the one who's like, writing the ads plus looking at books plus, being assistant to the CCO. Was not set up for success. Got fired from there too because I don't think I would succeed at that job now.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, okay. And then at that point, it was sort of that moment where I said, I'm going to do it. I know the first two jobs have not led to successful outcomes, but my heart is in it and I'm going to do it. It was just a situation and everyone's like, you should find a new career. You should go back to school, whatever. I was like, no, 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 this is it. So third job was the one that changed my career. The third job was Deutsche Advertising, Donny Deutsch's shop was starting their interactive division. And I got a call and they said, hey, would you be interested in working on this small client we just got called IKEA? We need a website and we're starting this division. So 8 of us started iDeutsch. And to this day, I've watched each of the 8 people just fly. They've done so phenomenally well. We were just such a well-oiled machine. They've gone on to own big businesses, be CMOs, CTO, like you name it. It was amazing. We spent an entire year working on IKEA.com and I won a ton of awards. And, that was the moment where I was like, okay, I was right.
Mm-mm. Great. That's awesome. So you took the I guess the failures or the learnings from
Hmm.
the first two jobs. Now the second job that you were fired from, it sounds like that was pretty clear why you were wearing
Hmm.
hats, and that, I mean, you're doing four people's jobs there. The first
Right.
one you mentioned, it was because you had a boss, not a leader. So what did you learn there, like, and how did reflecting on that affect your own leadership?
I think one of the biggest things the biggest takeaway that I had was that you shouldn't make colleagues compete. You should make them support each other and encourage each other. Because when you create a competitive environment, it becomes slightly toxic. So as I've managed through my career, I try to make sure that everyone is set up for success individually, as teams, as a group. And when you sort of pit people against each other, it creates a really difficult and stressful environment. I don't think it's necessary. I think colleagues inspire each other, right? If you have the right colleagues who are inspired, they say, oh, have you read this or have you seen this? And then you become more of a holistic team. But if you're saying, okay, you guys are going to compete and the best one will win and the worst one will lose, like that creates an environment that is completely unnecessary. So that's what I learned is you don't make colleagues compete, make them encourage and inspire.
I love that lesson. Now, um, in my experience, I've seen in sales environments, they do have that kind of competitive, like almost curate that intentionally because they
They
think that
do.
brings out
I've
the
seen
best.
that.
So, do you think there are certain situations where there is such a thing as healthy competition? Like, is it as black and white as that, or?
That is a great question. There is always a healthy competition, right? There is that moment where you see someone and you want to do it. You're like, oh, I wish I did that, or I wish I'd thought of that, right? That is healthy competition. Saying, oh, I really want to steal this client from this person because I want it is unhealthy, right? So there are different amounts of competition. I do believe you are correct. There is a fine line. It's not black and white. It's that sort of like gray area, right? Where you just sort of say, okay, this is healthy, this is unhealthy. Like, what is the line in between and how do you get there? I think it's a toggle and it's understanding your people, right?
Yep, 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 for sure. And so then you mentioned collaboration as kind of being the opposite of that kind of toxic competitive environment. And that's what you want to create and that's what you have been creating and you're conscious of that. How do you practically do that with a team? How do you
A
lift that
colla I
collaboration?
mean, collaboration really is easy. So if you take again, I'm gonna go back to like team versus individual. So if you have a big team, in my opinion, it's so easy to make sure they feel loved. You just keep an open door. So you have monthly meetings with the group or weekly or, whatever the cadence is, whatever suits the team and the size of whatever company. you're working for. So you have that open door cadence where everyone meets, they show their best work, they show things that inspire them, whatever it is, just like an open forum. Then you have individual one-on-ones with direct leaders, and then you have meetings with the others, like every other week with people you don't have a direct line to. And then you just keep an open door for everyone else. And I think that creates like an open door collaboration policy, knowing that people will come. And it's really nice when they come and they're like, hey, I have a question, or hey, I have a problem. Close the door. And like, whether the door is on Zoom or whether it's in person, I feel like it's really important for people to feel valued along the way, and just saying, okay, we're going to have a 1 month, once a month meeting where we all meet doesn't feel like a value. It just feels like a mandatory checklist.
Sure, sure. So the open door policy, um, how do you balance kind of potentially creating friendships, and that's my word, not yours, maybe you don't call it friendships, with the fact that they are reporting to you, and sometimes you might have to have crucial conversations, then emotions could get involved. I don't know if you've experienced that in the past, and how do you deal with that?
So it's hard in our world not to become friends with colleagues, right? Or employees. It's really hard because we're not an analytical, we're not in numbers or we lead with emotion, right? We lead with thoughtfulness. We lead with just all this great emotions, but we do lead with that because that's part of what we do, right? We have to understand the insights. It all comes back to understanding, personas, people, like how they work and how they think. So it's really hard to keep it a completely emotionless. I have become unapologetically friends with students I've had that I've taught at FIT and BU. I've become friends with people who have worked for me, my bosses, like my peers, my co-leaders, like I become friends. Having the conversation, the difficult conversation, and I've had to have those with people I adore. It's just it shouldn't be a shock, because if you are really leading with kindness, you'll have warned them so that there is no shock, right? It's understanding, like, what can I do to help you fix this situation, this scenario, or this incident, right? It's so you are always there lockstep. So there should be no completely challenging conversations like a one-off.
I love that. So you're saying there is a place for emotions in the workplace, for feeling.
Absolutely. There has to be. I mean, if you don't love what you do, and it doesn't show, then why are you doing it? Go into a different industry, right?
For sure. Yeah. So moving on to talking about values, Suzanne, you listed quite a few values here: creativity, boldness, mentorship, kindness, integrity, and trust, and continuous learning. How do those values kind of play out in your own leadership? Like, where does that start?
That's a really interesting question. I think there's an overlap. The one word that you didn't mention that I believe strongly in is equality. And I believe that everyone, from your bosses to the, EA, should be treated equally, to even the mailman. Like I would always stop when in agencies, I'd stop the mailman and be like, how's your day going? Like, what's going on? That equality of making sure that everybody through everything else is treated equally, I think is the most important thing.
Has there ever been times where that has that been difficult for you to express? Like, does it kind of grate against the sense of ambition? Does that make sense?
Sometimes, I mean, sometimes it feels like, but then it feels like sometimes it might be forced, right? But I think if you treat everyone equally, then it becomes the norm. And what it does is it also takes the emphasis off of the extreme senior leaders, because they see it. They see that I'm treating them exactly the same way as I'm treating their assistant, that there's no difference. And I think it is a little, one of my bosses, who is a well-known leader, sat me down once and he looked at me and he said, "You know, you're extremely disarming." And I was like, "I think that's a compliment." He said, "It's extreme." He's like, "It is such a compliment. It's one of your best qualities is that you just, when you talk to people, you disarm them. So they can't get all negative or they can't get aggressive." Like, I'm just like, "How you doing?" And being called disarming is, I guess, one of the greatest things I've been called. I've been called a lot of things, but that's probably one of the best.
Was that something that you consciously did? You
No,
wanted
it I had no idea. I mean, we were at an offsite leadership, and he sat down next to me and kinda, like, right before he was running this workshop, he sort of whispered in my ear, and he disarmed me by saying that. I was like, "What?"
She disarmed you by calling you
Yes. I was like, "Wow, that was a Jedi trick right there. You got me. Disarmed."
So thinking back then, Suzanne, disarming being one of the traits, what other traits can you think of that really helped you to get as far as you have done in your career?
I think kindness is one of the greatest, being empathetic, understanding people have their own unique situations, not getting too personal. I try there is that fine line going back to a question you had. How close do you get with your colleagues or your bosses or your employees? I had a rule: if I worked with you and you worked for me, you couldn't be friends with me on social media. I wouldn't accept until I left that particular position. I'm not as strongly opposed to that now, but there was a time where I was just like, okay, this is business and this is personal. And we don't go right. There is no in between. But I think understanding that these relationships and friendships develop out of the closeness of what we do. And I think, kindness at the end of the day is what leads it all.
Staying on this topic of kindness, Suzanne, has there been times where being kind has cost you?
So no, because as kind as I am, I have also been able to hold my ground on when I think something is right and when I think something should be pushed through. And I have fallen over my sword a few times, particularly early in my career. I think one of my biggest pivotal moments was I was at Ogilvy, New York, and I had a great idea that solved a client brief, and my heart was in it. And my boss, the CCO, kept saying no. He's like, "No, come up with other ideas." And I was like, "This is the idea." He said, "No, this isn't the idea." I said, "This is the idea." He's like, "Come up with others." So I did, and I made them super terrible just to be like, "See, this is the idea." So I kept leading. In the interim, I sort of had a meeting with a client, like, about other things. And they were like, "Oh, have you seen the brief?" And I was like, "I have the answer." So I sort of didn't tell them what it was, but I told them what I was thinking. And they were like, "That's the idea." So when I went to my boss, I was like, "Okay, this is the idea. I'm gonna go." I'm like, "I will, you can fire me if it doesn't work. This is the idea." So he finally acquiesced. He said yes. At which point I also convinced MTV to work with us on this idea and be the animators. They'd never worked in advertising before. So we brought them on for that. So as this idea grew and grew and grew, we had this animated campaign that MTV did, and it ended up we had like enough for a sweepstakes for like 2 weeks, but within 2 days, I think we had given everything away. So we had then we had to pivot and do a backup campaign. Fast forward to the campaign one, I can't even tell you how many awards, and it was a case study for Ogilvy for communication arts that year on when you are brave and when you say yes, how it can lead to clients being happy, product being sold, collaborations with iconic places, and your boss being like, "You were right." I mean, at the end of the day, he was like, "You were right. I should never have doubted you." So the kindness sometimes goes back at bay when it's important. Like, I know this is the campaign for that brand, and it's an iconic cosmetic brand, and they were so happy.
Wow, great result. And that example there, Suzanne, illustrates that you can still be kind even in those situations, right? You can hold your ground and still
Hmm.
be kind at the same time and just stand by your convictions.
Yes. And it's hard sometimes because that self-doubt that we all have, thinking, am I going too far? Is this too far? Should I give up? And the answer is no. If you believe it in your heart and you know there's a gut instinct that's part of what we do, that you have to believe, like, if your gut's like, this is it, this is it, this is it. And there have been a few times, I will admit, where my gut was saying, go for it. And other people said, no, you can't. And I did, after a few tries, I acquiesced. But this particular one, I mean, the fact was it went from a no to being a case study in communication arts on like best in class campaigns of the year, was to me and a boss saying, yes, you were right, was the validation I needed for that specific for a campaign.
For sure.
At this point in my career, I don't know that I would fall on my sword like that, but I have. Actually, that's not true. I have recently. I did something recently, so I disagree. I still do that. I'm like, no, I actually did.
Staying consistent.
Yes, if not anything else.
That's great. Suzanne, tell me about the barbecue email.
Yes, the famous email. And it's funny, I spoke about this years ago at Mexico, and it still is one of those ways of understanding how to create bravery out of failure. And that was the topic that I spoke at Mexico and mentioned this campaign. So when it was a while ago, I was working on a client called Ahold. They're a Ahold Deleuze. They are a supermarket chain. And we created this email campaign for them. And we were so excited. We figured out how to like animate it and create this fire emoji on a barbecue. And client loved it. We loved it. We were like, oh my God. So in the email, you can actually see it and it feels like you're there and you're grilling up and whatever. So we sent it out, and oh my goodness, did it fail epically. And the reason it failed epically is because we did not check the segmentation and the demographics on who we were sending it to. So what we actually did is we sent this like super amazing, juicy barbecue meat fest to a lot of vegetarians and vegans and people who were health conscious. And we were like, oh boy, because when we dug into the data, we were like, oh, this is so wrong. So the client was like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. We should have figured it out. They said, we still love this fire. We want to try it again. So that email campaign just absolutely bombed. So then what they said was like, let's do it with like marshmallows instead, or let's do it, so they sort of led us into the next iteration, which thankfully succeeded wonderfully and the clients were happy. But the clients were by our side the whole time saying, okay, yes, this was a failure, but what can we learn from it? So we learned that we got the target audience completely wrong and we fixed it.
Awesome turnaround.
Yes.
And was
It's nice to have clients like that, who are like, we get it. Like we love it. It was our idea to do this. Like, let's fix it.
I was just going to ask about that. Like, you had a very understanding client there. And is that because of the way that you built the relationship with the client, would you say?
I do love working with clients, and that's one of the things that shows. And I once had a client call me the client whisperer, and a very notoriously difficult brand. And he said, this is probably one of the most difficult companies to work with, and you are still incredible at how you treat us. And it's so funny. We still stay in touch. He's no longer at the company, but being called a client whisperer by a client is kind of one of those things where I was like, okay, that's not bad. I'm not mad at that.
That's up there with disarming.
Right, exactly.
Suzanne, I'd love to dig into that. Like the client whisperer. I mean, what a title.
Right.
Can you break that down? Like, what is your approach with building those type of relationships?
So it's interesting because at the beginning of my career, I was not talking to clients. There was always a buffer, right? There was an account person or a project manager or a creative director. There was someone talking to them. So it took me a while to get access to clients. But the thing I love is that they have such a wealth of information. And to be able to, when you just talk to them and ask them questions, you can find out more than you can on their website, on a brief, on any brand guidelines. all you have to do is talk. So whenever I start, currently, and I've been doing this for years with new clients, is I just talk to them. I'm like, okay, let's talk. Let's see. Like, I want to hear all about you, your company. Like, what's the problems? What's going right? Like, if you just sit down, and I have, done this poolside in LA and shoots. I've done this in meetings. I've done this in Zoom. Like, it doesn't matter where you are. It could be a coffee. It's just it's spending that one-on-one attention. When a client talks, you can get the answer. You'll know what they're looking for or what it needs to be fixed. I mean, it's that simple. They're telling you, and if, listening and understanding and translating that into deliverables is a different story, but sitting there and listening, saying, okay, I got it. This is what's frustrating you. Let's fix it.
So really that developing the art of listening and listening
Hmm.
well and being present in the conversation.
Right.
Great. Yeah. Because I've heard it said, like, you don't learn anything by talking. Right. So
No. And that's one of my favorite things is I love listening. I love hearing what people are saying because it's a lot of people just, a lot of people talk, and I love listening. It's just like you get so much out of the world. I can sit and ask someone, like, I meet questions and not say one thing about me, and I'll walk away. I'll know everything about them, and they're like, "Oh, I like her," but I haven't said one thing about myself. And I think there's a skill of understanding, like, if you listen and you ask the right way, you never have to reveal anything about yourself, and you'll get everything you need. It's a fascinating skill. You should try it, Andy. Just keep asking questions to someone, and like you're doing right now.
yeah, I've come across that myself. When if you spend coffee with somebody an hour and you've barely said anything, and somebody else asks that person, "How was that time with Suzanne?" or "How was that time with Andy?" They'll say, "It's fantastic. It was
Mhm.
such a great time." But because they were talking the whole time, because they were being
Right.
listened to the whole time. That's really great. So moving on, practical tools. Now you mentioned again in your notes that one of the biggest challenges in marketing and leadership is bridging the gap between a good idea and real world momentum.
Mhm.
What's the contrast there, and how do you overcome a challenge like that?
Oh, it's interesting. The key to that is a extremely buttoned up and incredibly exciting creative brief. It sounds so dull, but the creative brief is, to me, the Bible. If you can, everything is on that brief, there's no room for error, right? You have the problem, you have the target, you have the budget, you have the insight. And the thing that really, I think sort of holds the whole path and the whole creative pathway is that what is the one key message? So once you have that one key message, you can go, right? That's it. So to me, it's holding that and holding every side accountable. Like, okay, does this hit the brief? Is it on the brief? Brief, like literally brief, and it's just one of those things that I really, that is my Bible for every project. I will not start without a brief. And I write briefs obviously myself. But I would not expect someone to start work without a brief.
And how does that impact leadership? Where's the leadership element in that?
Well, you need sign off from everyone, right? You need everyone to say, yes, this is our brand, this is our message, this is our tone, this is our, and you know what it does, Andy, is it finds out what's missing, right? And when people can't align, because if people can't align on that, there's a fundamental problem on what is trying to be communicated. So that's where you get everyone to go, yep, this is it. These are our colors. This is our font. This is, and there's no room for error for someone to be like, well, I thought we said this. And that's where I think a lot of communications, I've been in briefings where it just derailed, where I just got to like, it went from the history to like, what we're trying to achieve. And the entire meeting went off the rails. And I was like, okay, well, it's good we're here for this.
So that reminds me of a principle of starting with the end in mind. Like, it's one of Stephen Covey's kind of leadership principles,
Hmm.
right? Like, so just knowing beforehand everything that you're setting out to achieve will make the execution a lot more straightforward and a lot more simple, and even like attainable. Um, how easy is it to do that? to create this bulletproof brief when you have a lot of stakeholders and a lot of cooks in the kitchen, as it were?
I mean, it really uncovers a lot of uh a lot of things, right? It brings all the cooks out and they all want to cook something up, but
Everyone
the
has an
fact of the
opinion.
matter is I sort of hold the line and say, if you can't agree on this, I need you to tell me what to change, and we'll start as soon as it's fixed. And then it holds everyone accountable to get in the same room, discuss what they need to fix, and go from there. So, it's critical. It's a hard, it's a hard thing. And normally, when you have a well-written brief, you have a great campaign coming out of it, or campaigns or brands. Like, it's because everybody is lockstep and everyone is aligned. You're not saying, okay, so we're going to do this thing and we have this budget. No, you're going through each of the brief, particulars. And I think that really, I think I wrote like 3 already this week, and I'm like, are they good enough? Are they good enough? And when the clients see it, they're like, "Oh, yeah, these are good." It's just I don't start work without a brief.
Do you ever have times where you disagree with what the client thinks should be part of the brief or what they've included? Because, I mean, assuming you're the expert, so
No, because they're the expert on their brand. I'm the expert on how to make their brand a world-class brand. So if they're like, "Okay, we need this thing," if it's extraneous, then it's extraneous and it can be omitted, right? It doesn't need to be integrated into anything. But if they know their brand, and that's what I love about the brand side, why I went brand side, is that you have the keys to the castle back there. You know what I mean? As opposed to the agency side where you have to get the keys from the castle or be aligned with the castle, right? It's different, like understanding what is going on behind the scenes versus helping the brands execute their vision. So, and the new trend, as I'm sure you know, is that brands are becoming all in house, or a lot, not all, but a lot of them are going in house. So they're building up their internal team, so they don't have to send work out to outside vendors as much.
yeah, yeah, sure. Uh, okay, priorities, Suzanne. Assuming
Yes,
you're very busy, not just
yes,
work and just juggling everything.
yes.
Uh, what is your kind of prioritization process?
That is very interesting. Yes, I am very busy. I have 2 teenage boys who seem to, for some reason, they say kids get easier when they get older, but mine just,
No, not your.
they just need more stuff now. That's all I'm saying. So prioritizing, like, the work-life balance that we all have, right? Or most of us have some kind of outside force. um, I actually do lists every day. I do a big list and small lists, and obviously I leave, and I've always done this throughout my career, I leave 20% room for something to explode. So 80% of the day is together, 20% is that variable. Client needs something urgently, a kid needs to pick up whatever that 20% is or looks like. 80% is planned, 20% is left to last minute, you know, somethings,
Yeah.
emergencies.
Is that list scheduled in, or is it just kind of here's what I need to do? And
It's here's what I need to do. I actually have it. I have an actual list on my phone, but then I also have a whiteboard to the right of me, and I do my highlights. Not, I don't get super granular, but I do the day's highlights. I get more granular on my phone, and then I'll set, I'm sure like the rest of us, I'll set meeting times if there's times I need to work, or, so I can't be like, I'll say, okay, now we're going to write this, or now we're going to do this, or now we're going to have our client calls are easy because, you set them up when you set them up. But the work time, I think, is the easiest time to derail. Like, how do you sit down, discipline yourself, and say, okay, this is the time we're going to be working on this. And so I'll put an hour, like, write this creative brief, or whatever is needed, from that day.
yeah, and to sustain that like focus and energy and making sure that you're on top of things, requires, you mentioned discipline there, and going back to self leadership. Like what
Mhm.
kind of habits or routines do you follow to help keep yourself like on top, energized, refreshed?
I mean, I think, just making sure that I can balance everything. To me, a successful day is when I've done one thing professionally really well and one thing personally really well. I do, like the rest of us, I have an ongoing list of to-do items, but if I can get one thing done on a professional level, one thing done on a personal level that I feel really good about, that's my day.
Great. It's great. Now, um, going to back to kind of conversations here and psychological safety.
Oh,
You didn't mention that term, but it's definitely something that you've done. You mentioned that you want to create a collaborative culture. You have an open door policy. How do you kind of create that psychological safety without lowering standards?
it's interesting. Again, it goes back, I think, to listening, and listening to the person and what they need to feel safe. Creating safety is a very interesting, it's a very interesting factor. How do you create a relationship quickly with someone to get the best work out? Right. And say you're strangers, right? And you're thrown into a campaign together and you're like, okay, client needs this. Oh, by the way, the client's challenging and expect a lot of rounds of revisions, right? You're not going to get it done. How do you create an instant relationship, right? And that's what I think about. Like, put the worst case scenario, the client's difficult, expect them to maybe you accidentally see one of their emails and they're really, really rude, right? Which happens in the real world, right? You accidentally get something, somebody's attached something that account person should have held tightly. But you see this like, oh, that team is terrible, right? So then you've got voices in your head. So creating a safety net for people who particularly I think in marketing and advertising, because we feel more emotions towards our work than, as I mentioned before, like maybe a doctor does, but who knows? Like it's different feels. I'm going to say mathematician just to make it work, right? So someone who works with numbers probably doesn't feel as emotional towards their peers or their work as we do. So, yeah, creating that safety net is understanding that things cannot always be taken personally, and sometimes it is best just to let the noise sort of roll off, and just take that, not take it personally. I think that's one of the things that I've definitely grown through my career, which is a thick skin, because you have to be able to understand, okay, this isn't personal, or this is personal. It might be, but for the most part, if things are good, it's not personal. It is a frustrated client who wants results, who has a boss who's saying, "Where are the results?" So the frustration then sort of trickle down.
Yeah, yeah. And I love that you mentioned that because you've talked about emotions kind of being freely expressed in the workplace, and that's what you like, and you're in the industry where that's valued and that's needed to get the best.
Right.
And then also we should develop a thick skin and kind of have a resilience against like other people's emotions and feelings. Like, what thoughts do you have in your head, or what beliefs do you have to make sure that you don't take things personally, because that will then affect how you perform, I assume.
It's really easy to take things personally. It's very easy to like feel them, especially, early in your career. So people who are less seasoned, who are not used to being told their work isn't good enough. So when you say to a junior person, your work isn't good enough, sometimes they hear, I'm not good enough. And I think that becomes a personal thing, right? But as you move on through a career, you hear this work isn't good enough, and you hear the clients didn't understand what I'm trying to prove, right? It becomes a very different narrative. And sometimes it's a matter of, when you get to a senior level, you say, okay, the work isn't good enough. then you say, what can we do together to improve it? Right? How can we collaborate? What can we do to fix this? So you are at different levels on how you sort of take in the your work isn't good enough. It's, you as you get older, you listen to it in a different way and you can find different solutions.
Absolutely. So that's a perspective shift to change the narrative, to change the meaning of what somebody is saying. Um, that comes with maturity,
Hmm. And experience.
experience. Is it something that somebody can do straight away? Like if they're early on in their career and they haven't like had enough of those battles and then the scars to kind of build that thick skin?
I mean, I think that if I were starting over again, and I do teach at students, university students. I go in and I do adjunct professor, and I watch them, and they're just so eager. It makes me so happy. It reminds me of when I just was fresh out of school, and I'm like so excited to go into this, and then got fired from my first two jobs, so less exciting. But seeing that pre-real world excitement is just unbelievable. And it's just to say, okay, you have to learn the hard lessons of life early on. I think one of the ways to navigate it is to say, as you get into your career, say, okay, when the client says your work isn't good enough, you say, what can we do to fix it? So get to the senior level faster without, as many accidents along the way, I suppose.
Yeah. No, that's really good. That's really good. Thank you, Suzanne. Um, okay. What is your definition of leadership?
Leadership. I think I would define leadership as, that's a great question. I would define leadership as someone who works and collaborates to create results and change mindset. So a leader is someone who can collaborate, create, and inspire.
Great. And that's something that you can do regardless of position.
I think anyone can be a leader. You can be a leader in school by, in groups. You could be a leader in your 20s by leading your friends. Anyone, there are, I'd like to say there are born leaders. There are people who learn to lead. You can see it, I think, in people early on. Can they lead? Will they be a leader or will they just be a doer? I think it's so easy to see in certain people and it's so hard to see in others. Some people only become leaders by having a great leader. I've been so fortunate. I've had so many great leaders. I've had so many great mentors along the way. I didn't realize how important it was to have great mentors. It changes everything. That one person or few people who have your back. So one of the things that I do is I like to mentor young female creatives who are either just getting out of school or early in their career in their 20s. I take a few on every year. And I pick females because I really, out of, college, didn't really have that many, and particularly never had female leaders mentoring me. It was always male. So I try to go out of my way to take on a few, depending on my bandwidth every year.
So yeah, the mentorship, having the role models, that almost for someone who is younger in their kind of walk in life, to see that being modeled for them is, I
Mhm.
assume, massively inspiring, right? It reveals to them what's actually possible, and that's part of why you do it.
I hope, that it's sort of a pay forward thing. So when they get to the point in their career that they can, mentor someone that they would. So that's to me, it's like I do it because I want to help people. I've helped, I've helped everything from, students to young creatives. And one of my favorites, she was a student of mine at FIT. I helped her negotiate her first job contract. She asked me to look at it. She asked if there was anything else she didn't know. She's doing phenomenally well. I think she's been in her career like 10 years now. And I love just seeing her shine. And as she goes through her career, like I'm just watching her grow and glow. And she was really smart. She sought out mentors. And, so every job, she would then add another and another and another. Like, she was very smart about it. So being proactive about finding mentors isn't for the faint at heart, but seeing it in play is like quite unbelievable.
Yeah. So you actually, that sounds like a very um, powerful approach to helping develop your own leadership, right? Finding those people that you want to emulate or that you really respect and can learn from. That can really accelerate the leadership journey for yourself. Great. Suzanne, finding your hook. That's something that we had discussed in preparation for our
Yes, we did.
conversation. Tell me about that.
So I think finding your hook is really who you are as a brand and as a person. So one of the things that I've actually had throughout my career is I've had people stop me and say, "Who are you? Why are you working on my campaign?" So that's happened to me. Celebrity. I was at a pre-shoot dinner, and she stopped the entire table. It was all chefs and photographers and clients, and she's like, "Suzanne, why are you the creative director of my campaign?" And I was just like, "Oh." And if I hadn't had it rehearsed, I would have been beside myself. I mean, stopped a table of 20 just to sort of ask me. I've had it in elevators where people are like, "Who are you?" Um, and I think it's so, so, so critical to know your brand, to know your hook, what makes you different. How do you describe yourself in 1 to 2 to 3 sentences? And then make everything come out of that. So your LinkedIn profile should be that. Your social media should reflect that. Your resume should reflect that. If you are a person who loves horses and yet loves data, how do you integrate that? And that's an extreme example, but what is your hook and how do you convey that to everyone?
So how do you do that? How do you find your hook?
I think it's going out and understanding understanding my hook didn't come for years, right? I didn't even know that I needed a brand. But back in the day, I felt like you didn't really need a brand. People are just like, "Oh, did you hear about this copywriter? She's over here." And then after a certain time, obviously it was, once I had my first few jobs, then I was getting poached. So people would be like, "Oh, you need to grab her for that or whatever." So the hook for me, I didn't realize but the importance of it. But with a sea of people and you're all fighting for the same client or the same job or whatever it is, having that one thing that says, "I'm this person and I can do that." Or, I think after all these years, I've honed it down to, an international marketing and advertising creator with over 100 advertising awards, whatever it is. I have that hook and sort of try to lean into it. But that again, it grows. It grows with time and with experience,
Yeah.
and it evolves. It's like a portfolio; it should always evolve.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So it's your elevator pitch for
Hmm.
yourself,
Yeah, for sure.
maybe tied to not I was going to say identity, but it's maybe tied to like a crucial part of what you do.
Correct.
Succinct description.
And it's, think of it as like how you would do your bio in LinkedIn, right? Like, what would you say? What is that summary? The summary is the hook, or it's it's almost like if people had a unique selling point, that USP that are all of our clients' brands do. Like, what is your USP? What is that one thing that makes you different from everybody else? And I ask when I meet with companies or vendors or whatever, I'm like, what makes you different than your competition? If
Yeah.
you can't answer that one thing, then you can't compete.
Yeah. Succinctly as well. And people probably could answer it by stumbling over themselves and having drawing out a long explanation.
Andy, if I told you, I'll tell you after this meeting who the celebrity was. It was quite intense.
Okay.
She was no joke. She was like, "Duh, duh, duh, entire table shut down. Why are you?" And I was like, the pointing too. I was like, stop, I'm scared.
Wow. So
Yeah.
for our listeners, Suzanne, and like this sounds like quite important. I really like it. What would be the first steps they would take to find their personal hook, whether it's for themselves or for the work they represent?
I think it's, doing an exercise like, what are the things that describe you the best? What are the things that describe your work? What do you want to do? So it's not just what you do now, it's like where you see yourself in 5 years. So, if you see yourself as a future, I don't know, manager, right? So, then lead into the leadership and all the leadership things you've done. So it's almost thinking ahead of where you're going to be instead of where you are right now.
Great. Thanks, Suzanne. Okay. What advice do you have for aspiring leaders?
I think just be kind, be nice, never like don't burn bridges. It's the easiest thing to do is when you leave, even if it's a terrible situation, go and thank the president, go and thank the CEO for the opportunity. I do it every time I leave a job. You never know. Just go and say thank you. And if you can't meet with them, they're too busy, write them a note. Just make sure that you leave you leave as gracefully as you enter every job. I think that would be, my advice.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Suzanne. And thank you so much for your time. And as we come to the end of this conversation, do you have any other final parting words?
Oh, I'm just thank you so much for having me. This is so fun. Everything I prepared, I think, derailed in such a good way.
Yeah.
This is amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne. Great.
Thanks for listening to The Instant Leader. If this episode helped, please follow the show and leave a quick review. It really helps others find us. For practical resources and to join the community, head to theinstantleader.com. I'm Andy Lee. See you next time.